Hi, I'm John Tickles, and welcome to Remote RPGs. Time for a great Western title on the PlayStation 1. Need a hint? Look! Arms! And they seem to be spinning wildly? Wild Arms 2. Originally released in 1999 Japan, North America in 2000, and the PlayStation Network in 2009 by Mediavision, Wild Arms 2 is the sequel to Wild Arms, obviously. Compared to the other games in the series, the game is definitely the black sheep, getting some pretty bad scores by mainstream reviewers. What is it with the second game in the series always being the black sheep? Anyway, do I agree with these reviewers? Is it a bad game? Well, I agree with them to a point. Although it is a solid sequel that has a lot of effort behind it, the game does have some issues that drags it behind its older brother's shadow. However, the game does show a lot of effort, even if it doesn't all click, making it a worthy experience in my opinion. Let's start with the story. Wild Arms 2 takes place on the same world as the first, Gaia, but they don't make it clear if this is a sequel, a prequel, a squeakquel, alternate timeline, nothing. However, the world is slowly dying, so that's always lame. It seems like this planet is always dying. What a goddamn complainer. The game stars our protagonist, Ashley, who's a guy. Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but I've never met a guy named Ashley. That's a girl's name. Anyway, Ashley is a young soldier in a military organization, but his life is forever changed when ancient demons are resurrected and attack his group at a ceremony, and the young man is embedded with an ancient evil, a terrible power. Meanwhile, Brad is a former war hero, being chased down as a criminal for crimes he may or may not be guilty of. And Lilka is a little magician with some self-confidence issues. Similarly to the first game, you get the option to play as any of these characters in any order for a while before the plot dictates that they must meet up. Once they do, they're recruited in a special military organization known as ARMS, whose mission is to protect the world from a dangerous terrorist organization known as Odessa, looking to destroy the planet. It's up to our three heroes to thwart evil and find a way to correct the mistakes of the past in order to save the world and the people they love. This story of Wild Arms 2 is nothing to write home about. It's a pretty run-of-the-mill tale about a group of unlikely heroes defeating the odds in order to save the world from destruction. Like 70% of RPGs. The main plot comes with a few twists and some interesting developments, but the story drags out way too long and the characters don't have enough mustard to make a good hot dog, if you know what I'm saying. Generally, the wisest thing to do in an RPG is to base the narrative off of a main character and the struggles that go on around him and his development, like Cloud Strife in Final Fantasy VII, or Justin from Grandia. These plots frame big stories within the development of one character, and it's just one way to create a classical emotional core that your audience can grab onto the whole way. Or you can have a plot that focuses more on the bigger plot than just a character or two, like the Persona games. I felt like Wild Arms 2 fit into neither of these categories. We don't care too much for our protagonist, and the game tries to be darker and more mature than its predecessor, but that takes away some of its charm, and the main character doesn't fill that void. Ashley does have a nice subplot about his girlfriend, but it's super duper cliche and predictable to the point where you really don't care much for him more than your doorknob. And the game won't fit into the other category either, because it was a pretty poor, awkward translation, and the story just has a slow, dragging pace and really hammy JRPG elements. It's really hard to get into this narrative. It's just so overblown and it lacks subtlety and it takes its time, but I guess someone could argue that there's charm in that, I suppose. Also, the episodic nature was kind of fun, but the story lacked focus and drive, just making it average. To be fair, one could argue that the original Wild Arms was like that too, but at least that game kept it simpler where it needed to be and had a solid emotional core. But these characters and plot just don't do too much for me. I don't know, maybe it's just my preference. Let's get into the characters. We have Ashley, who's stoic and awesome and blah blah blah. Why do I even have to bother going over RPG protagonists anymore? Once you've seen one, you've seen like 80% of them. And even though Ashley isn't silent, he might as well be. The only interesting thing in his part of the story is that he has a berserk-like issue with dealing with a massive ancient power inside of him, but not enough to make him a super memorable character. Even Rudy was more memorable, and he was silent. Brad is a pretty cool character, being this big gruff war hero, but I don't know, shouldn't he be kind of more resistant to the idea of working with these people? What if you were a war veteran in your mid-30s and you'd seen some shit, but you have to work with an 18-year-old boy, I think he's 18, I don't know, and a 14-year-old girl telling you what you should do against a terrorist organization? What would you do, honestly? Yeah, I'd give him 5 across the ass too. Still, Brad is a cool enough character with a solid backstory. Lilka is a little teenage girl who's probably the most memorable of the bunch, having issues living within her older sister's shadow as a mage. She is slightly bubbly and clearly the comic relief character to balance out the other two rather quiet men, and she fights the legions of evil using a fucking umbrella. Oh my god, so this is what Mary Poppins did as a child. Major props for that. I can't really go over the other characters without spoiling too much, but I will reveal that unlike the first game, you get more characters for your party other than your given 3, which is a nice mix-up for strategy, but more on that later. The real glory of Wild Arms 2 comes from its gameplay, which saves this title from where a lackluster story could not. First of all, the game is enormous. If you're one of those completionist gamers who wants to get lost in a new world for 60 plus hours, then this is the game for you because there are so many cool side quests and optional extras that put a lot of meat on the game that already takes 40 hours or so to beat. Personally, I have a lot of games to play, so I'm not one of those gamers, but if you are, you'll feel like a fat kid at a candy store with this title. Wild Arms 2 is your run-of-the-mill JRPG. You run across your world with your party, random battles, equipment management, magic, the works. The biggest deviation from regular RPGs, and something that's a focus of the Wild Arms series, is the action puzzle solving. What I mean by that is, unlike other RPGs, where the puzzles consist of pushing objects around, Wild Arms 2 makes you feel more like an Indiana Jones, killing Nazis and fornicating with women. Not quite, but you run across a variety of dungeons in the game, each with various themes and challenges. This is actually my favorite aspect of the game, because these dungeons show a lot of creativity and depth. You see, while running around, you and your party have all these different items, like Ashley gets a knife, Brad gets this is Sparta kick, and Lilka gets some magic powers. And that's just the beginning. There's a very Zelda-esque style to these puzzles, like the original, and in that vein, these are some pretty action-oriented puzzles, so be ready for that. If you get hit or screw up sometimes, you'll lose HP, so don't screw around too much. The title upgrades the simpler, but still good puzzles of the original, with bigger and more elaborate ones. Although many of the puzzles were fantastic and fun, puzzles can be way too cryptic sometimes, especially with the aforementioned poor translation. Those text-based puzzles and mazes were absolute bullshit. Thankfully, my eBay buddy sent a strategy guide with the title, so I was set. I'd have game facts nearby. Something I don't enjoy about this game, but I've seen a lot of other RPGs, is having to do little random things to progress the plot, like talk to every villager, or wander around this place for 15 minutes. It's a where the fuck do I go kind of game, and I hate those. I'm an adult. I have things to do, like write online reviews for video games over a decade old. Jeez. Even the ending of the game is way too damn long. Ugh. One cool thing about the game is that money is pretty easy to find at least, and as we know, bitches love money. My eyes! Oh my god, I can't see! Ah! One thing that pisses me off about the game is the way to find new locations. For whatever reason, instead of physically seeing a city or a dungeon on the overworld, you have to wander around and hit the square button when you think you're in the right area, and then a magical circle will emit to make the town magically appear. That is friggin' bullshit. Why in God's name can a city not be where a city is supposed to be? Does Toronto just not physically exist until I make it so? I can like walk over a city and not see it until I use my radar beam. What if I'm standing on a building or something when I use a radar? Does it like launch me in the sky? That would be a pretty cool way to travel in an RPG. Are these characters so stupid that they can't see a city? They probably explain this in-game, but I don't care, it's just one of the ways the game likes to waste your time. Later in the game, you do get a radar that shows where things are on the map as dots, but it's still just an annoying process in my opinion. I don't get it. One of the newer features that I did like, and I don't see in RPGs, is the ability to dodge random battles. Yeah, if you're walking around and your character gets this exclamation mark above their head, you can hit the square button quickly to avoid the battle completely. This dodging foes mechanic is actually really innovative, and it's an interesting feature, with the only drawback being that some battles are unavoidable. Still, it keeps you on your toes, especially when your party is really weak. Anyway, the battle system is pretty good in this game, a step up from the original in a few ways. Firstly, you'll have more characters this time, so there's a lot more variety and strategy than the original game, where you were limited to a threesome. Here, all of the characters have noticeable strengths and weaknesses, and there are many ways to go about combat, whether it's being safe or a group of all-out attackers. You can switch characters whenever you want without real penalties, so feel free to do so. Also, everybody gets experience, so even if they don't show up in battles, you can switch without worrying about anything, and use characters for certain situations. Unlike many other RPGs, like that thing from Xenogears, or Cait Sith from Final Fantasy VII, or Yosuke from Persona 4, all of these characters are strong for their own reasons, so you always feel compelled to use them all. The game carries over the basic force meters and guardian creatures from the last game, and there's also some micromanaging to be done. What I really love about this battle system is its difficulty. It's not like those games where you have to grind a whole lot or where something is too easy like the original, but in Wild Arms 2, the difficulty of the bosses is that satisfying in between, where you feel like you earned that victory, but without removing a few hairs. Maybe it's just the way I played, but by the end of the game, I was using every item at my disposal and just barely defeated the final boss, which is incredibly satisfying. In short, I don't have too much bad to say about the battle system. It didn't really waste your time and it was fun, and it provided a good RPG challenge. The graphics in the game were pretty good for the PlayStation, but they definitely pale in comparison to its cousin, Chrono Cross, which was released around the same time. But Square probably did have a lot more money at its disposal. The overworld is rather simplistic, but the battle graphics are quite an improvement over the original. They actually look like people now. And some of those battle animations are really nifty. I also like the strange anime style the game had going, with a lot of the animations and touches that were awkward, but still entertaining for how silly they were. It was really cool. For example, each boss had this Zelda-like introduction where they announced the characters in a really over-dramatic way. It's one of the ways the game was able to put some charm in a title that lacked it in a lot of places. There were some great moments, cool designs for the dungeons and characters, and a whole bunch of fun graphical ideas in all the variety of the places you visit. The music in the game was pretty solid as well. There are only a few really notable pieces, which is slightly disappointing compared to the masterful original, but there's still some really good dungeon themes, overworld pieces, town themes, and such to keep you happy. In conclusion, Wild Arms 2 is a decent sequel to the first Wild Arms, it's just not as sharp and tight as it should be. The story is pretty weak and sluggish, and some of the exploration can get really annoying. However, there's a lot of material here to keep you busy, and the battle system, dungeon design, graphics, and music are all very impressive, making this a much better experience than most reviewers would have you believe. It's one of those rarer reviews where I'm not quite sure how to feel about it, because I really want to like it and recommend it as much as the first, but I found it really genuinely annoying at some parts. So I'm gonna recommend this title to RPG completionists and fans of the first title, but to the general audience, you should be a little wary of it. So unless you like Zelda-esque RPGs and don't really care for story, then this one is probably worth passing over, but I don't think it's as bad as people say. In any case, it's not that difficult to track down, especially since it's on the PlayStation Network. And if you get it cheap like I did, it's not a bad investment. Well, that's all for now. So, until next time, I'm John Tickles, and I look forward to our next random encounter.